Hey, Gerri.
Hello, Imy. I am glad to see you.
Oh, it's good to see you. It's been a bit crazy. So what's happening? What's happening in your world?
I could answer that on a lot of levels. I've got two cats with me and a cup of tea around all the new technology. So what could possibly go wrong?
Oh,
Professionally, I've been buzzing around doing everything I think I'm supposed to be doing. A couple of weeks back, I did some really good education with Michael Yapko, who was on my list of people to see. So on that kind of bucket list of, I do want to see something by him, and it was really good, even though it was on the Zoom. I've been doing supervision. I've been having big days. I've been fluttering around. But on a personal level, even though there's nothing bad and I'm aware of massive privilege, and even massive privilege in the sense, that it's really hard to admit this in this day and age, but I work less hard than a lot of people. Although I have big days, 2021 has been distinguished by tailoring back the old psychology and actually working a day less in my hospital job. But I still, underneath it, I still feel kind of tired and flat, and I guess a sense of ennui.
Oh no.
And I don't know what that is. Like, is that burnout? Is that getting old? Is that just being a dick? Is that just whinging? When you can't busy boast anymore, do you have to whinge about how tired you are?
The busy boast.
Perhaps our friends in the corporate world could clarify that for us. So
well, they're not busy doing inner work, in my experience. They're busy doing outer work. So they're busy. Oh man, what do we do with this?
Done outer work. Okay, I'm behind in the waxing, but the eyebrows are looking good.
Well, on that front,
I don't know what you're saying about the business world being superior to psychology.
Well, oh man. Okay. So what are we wrestling with at the moment? With the feeling of, is it a feeling of like, what is this all about? Why am I doing this crazy job?
A little. I mean, maybe a little, and maybe the days are too big. At the end of when I see clients in private practice, at the end of that, although it's tiring, it is a very good energy.
That's true. I agree with you. Like in the beginning, you're like, oh God, got to face the abyss for another 7 hours at the abyss. Yeah. Why? Yeah. But I think it is. I think this is a good question. Like, why do we do this job?
Yeah.
And I don't expect you to have the answer necessarily, because I think there are a lot of, like, I work with a lot of students. I supervise a lot of registrars and people approaching registration, and I think it's a really important question that you have to ask yourself all the time, like, why the hell am I doing this job? Because if you can't find meaning because I think the psychologists don't necessarily get paid in money. You get paid in another currency, I think. It's an intangible but deeply fulfilling currency when it happens. So
what is our currency?
Yeah. And I'm asking you this question, but at the same time, in order to get the answer, I've also got to really ask myself the same question. So I'm trying to do that, even though I'm asking you as well. I mean, I suppose why do we do this? Well, I didn't think I could do anything else. Is the truth. I don't know why that was the way it was exactly. I mean, I guess you can look to your background and all that, and that's an obvious answer. And it's not untrue, but it's not just that. Like, why do we? So, what is it about the work that gets you up in the morning, Gerri?
Well, I think that the the answer changes, and you and I are at a different point, that the answer to the question could possibly be different from when the question was asked of us, if it ever was, in the mid-90s.
Oh, God.
So in the Keating years, I
the
can
olden
remember.
days, the olden days.
Yeah, so the uni years, I can remember thinking, I want to be able to die having done something interesting or something important. So that was why I guess that was it initially. And also I wanted to help people, you know, it sounds like such a stereotype, doesn't it? But I did want to help people, and I wanted to help people in an effective way.
Yeah. I feel you.
What is the answer now? I don't know. What gets me up in the morning? Like, I don't mean to be facetious, but it is the alarm clock. It is habit. It is ingrained habit, especially in my hospital job, which is quite far away from where I live. So I've had that discipline of, you know, laying out my clothes the night before, laying out my lunch the night before.
Bless you.
You read a really informative article in Oprah magazine.
Did you?
Back in the early 2000s. Yeah,
how much
very
do you miss
influential.
Oprah? I miss Oprah. I just, you know, I miss Oprah. I miss the way that the show used to go. In the beginning, there'd be large breaks between ads, and then there'd be short breaks at the end, and that would be disappointing. You'd be like, oh, you want more of Oprah? And YouTube.
Oprah's so can do. Like, it's all about the right bra, the right morning routine, reading the right books, and then you feel like anything's possible. Yeah,
and try and lose weight if sometimes, and then other times no.
Yeah, exactly. And we could all have a friend like Gail.
Gail's awesome. Gail's awesome.
But Oprah will always live within us. She's out
there in the collective unconscious now, isn't she? She's out there as an archetype.
Absolutely. Even though now it's only sort of guest interviews, but I don't feel ashamed to say that I've learned a lot from Oprah.
I think I did too. But I've got colleagues who really diss Oprah, you know. And I'm like, I don't get it. Do you experience that kind of actually, this is a difficult thing to ask about. So even colleagues that is sort of a downing, like a putting down of transformation, good work, doing well at this job, whatever that means. I'm not even sure what that means. What does it mean? What do you think it means to be doing well?
That's a really good question, because so much of our definition of doing well can be just the absence of problems, the absence of disaster or stress or being on the edge of falling apart. So I guess doing well is, I've answered my own question. Doing well is the absence of those things, but I guess I want to feel like my clients are progressing. I guess I want to feel like I work somewhere where I'm valued, or where I guess more broadly clinical psychology is valued. I want to be able to have the resources to be able to do my job, which sometimes in a government job is not the case. But having said that, is generally the case in private practice. You generally have the resources to be able to do it, although not always, because that's when issues like admin support and stuff like that comes in. But now I feel very grateful. I do. We could have a gratitude moment, Oprah style, about where I work at the moment in private practice, because I feel like I have worked in some places that were difficult. Or where there were people who were, I think, undermining me, sounding paranoid.
No, it's not. I don't think that is paranoid. I think it's complicated, that dynamic with in psychology, or in cast a broader net, health services, community services, support services, where there's the primary agent of transfer of service is like a relationship of some kind where there's dialogue involved. And I think women can get extremely competitive about who is more empathic or who's the best support for the. I mean, that's really complicated. That
it can be one of the competitions, hey, within the multidisciplinary team. Who is the therapeutic hero?
Oh God! Yes.
Sometimes that manifests itself with who's found out the most. So and so went in to talk to them and found out X, Y, Z, and you feel like saying, really? It's very tempting to just make up something. Well, I went in and I found out X, Y, Z. Don't do this at home, kids. I'm just saying that's an urge within me. I'm not saying I've ever done it.
Well, it's tricky that when you're trying to socialize with colleagues, like, and negotiate the boundary between your work, which is kind of like relationship based and clapped in confidentiality and privacy, or at least it needs to appear that way. But actually, because women like to gossip, it's one of the ways they connect to each other. I really feel like bringing in Jordan Peterson at this point, but I think we have to save that.
Yeah, we're not bringing in Jordan Peterson. The only context which I would countenance bringing in Jordan Peterson is if we were going to do a role play where you, Imy, would be Jordan Peterson and I would be the hot young activist.
I
would be a hot young activist that takes him on.
I have a vision in my ridiculous moments. I feel like, no, we can't talk about this. We have to leave this for another time.
Why aren't we allowed to talk about
because I'll just get on a roll, and then I think we have to build. I need to build up. I need to get in training to deal with Jordan Peterson.
You need to build up to your rant.
I need to build.
I don't even know from the way you're talking. Are you pro Jordan Peterson or are you anti Jordan Peterson?
What I find astonishing about Jordan Peterson is, like, I've read a lot of the literature he cites and references, not to the degree that he's read it, but I know where he's coming from, and I agree with a lot of his conceptualizations. But where I think he falls down enormously is he's not a woman. He doesn't have the lived experience of being in a female body and walking around and trying to build a dream or a vision, or, I get that women have children, and for many of us,
we're clear on this, Jordan.
Yes, there's an anatomical reason for that. Thank you, that's fine. But there's I think when Jordan gives interviews, as impressive as his intellect is, he doesn't give credence or try and help the speaker who disagrees with him. And he just sort of thinks that they're a lunatic or something.
I've seen him do really angry, shut down kind of body language. How dare you criticize me? Also, anyway, do you know what happened to Jordan Peterson? Does anyone know that he became an addict and then was?
No, he had he does have I think he sits on that bipolar spectrum. And he'll freely admit to that, so that's not new information. And I think he'd been receiving treatment for some time, I think well over a decade, taking SSRIs. And I've seen this in practice myself. There are some bad side effects if you try and come off an SSRI after you've been on it for a long time. And the story goes that he started experiencing something called akathisia, which is like a restlessness. You can't stop moving, and you really can't stop moving. And I think it's got something to do with the serotonin pathway in the brain. And it's just, it would be like a sort of detox function for the body, trying to find that new homeostasis once again, and just going through symptoms. And it's bloody awful. And he also was prescribed, I think it wasn't Valium, but it was and it wasn't. I haven't got the name of the drug in my mind, but it's on that Valium spectrum. So when he was on a very low dose, what I found strange about this story is he did his doctoral thesis in alcohol use, and so that's the same pathway that Valium uses. Or it's the same addictive pathway. And I thought, mate, how could you have taken this script and not known that you were going to become dependent on this drug? And so prescription was changed, wife got very ill, wheels fell off, lots of chaos, and he couldn't take the drug anymore and tried to do a supervised detox. It didn't work. They upped the medication. And so he had this akathisia. He had some, it is a bit of a hard thing to follow unless you kind of like, I guess you'd need to know a lot about, or be very interested in chronic illness to have a sense of what went on.
As you're talking, I am more aware that we should have compassion for him. The Guardian reviewed his latest book and said, "Look, it's good. He just doesn't have a sense of humour." And I think that's a fair kind of review. Yeah. And I guess I absolutely have to have the last word on Jordan Peterson here.
Okay, off you go. Yep.
He essentially talks about individual factors at the expense of the societal factors, and tends to deny that those are in place, or deny that those are in place in any kind of way that can't be overcome by individual strength or resilience or discipline. And as a clinical psychologist, in some ways I get that. Like we work with individual change, right?
Yeah.
We are not working
with
societal change. We are not working with the upstream drivers, as our public health colleagues would say. But I think it's really important, and especially the interconnectedness of all things, especially as you're saying, with women's issues.
Well, he loves to talk about, he used to call it the dominance hierarchy, and there's a very good reason for that because it's defined on largely dominance. But then he rebranded it as the competence hierarchy, which suggests that, and this is a phenomenological thing, like you can look at our culture and go, oh yeah, it's all organised around, well, it's a male dominance or male competence hierarchy. And I think there's a lot of self-confirming or confirming biases in play in the way he peruses the data, and it becomes extremely complicated when you're looking for confirming data all the time. And but he's got he cites some massive metadata about Scandinavian countries and women choosing female-dominated professions when they have the choice. It's like, well, see, that disproves the whole thing, so just shut up. And it's not as simple as that because the dominance hierarchy or the competence hierarchy, it's okay at the top level of it. But have a look what's going on the bottom, what bodies you're crushing to stand on to get this standard of living that apparently is competence-based. And then Jordan bangs on about the 80-20 rule, the Pareto distribution, which I think reflects this problem. It's a distribution issue. So the top 20% get the resources and it's anyway, don't get me started because I just get upset about it. But I'm working up to an actual conversation. But Jordan won't listen to you unless you have you're armed with artillery of data and you can go toe to toe. And it's very hard to do that because of the role he's had in his life. He's immersed in this data all the time, whereas I'm immersed in practice.
Yeah. YouTube has a very that's right, YouTube and Oprah. We're surprisingly lowbrow, aren't we? Let's talk about Oprah, not Oprah. Jordan, there's a wonderful YouTube. It's probably about half an hour of your life, but it's a British political journalist called Helen Lewis who interviews Jordan Peterson for GQ magazine. It's really good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I think she did a pretty good job.
She did a really good job. Yeah.
I just wanted to help her out with a bit of data a few times, but
she was doing okay, wasn't she?
Good. Yeah, she was.
She kept it very pleasant and very positive, which you need to do. Yeah. And I've heard him speak about that interview, and he's really angry about it, or was at the time I heard him speak, or at least that was my interpretation.
Well, I know that there's been a big kerfuffle in Canada about compelled speech legislation. That's where all this starts. But at the same time, 200 of his colleagues called for his tenure to be revoked via sometimes in the morning, I can't remember words, like a
petition.
Petition. Thank you, Gerri. Thank you. I do wake up by 1 o'clock, early morning brain fog from the day before. Well, now look, it's very hard to say. There's something in that. I don't know what it is, but it may be other circumstances. It may not be. But I think he's a little bit one-eyed in his appraisal of things, and he'll use his interpretation of the data to support that. But he's got incredible analysis of myth and legend and all that sort of shit. And he's got a reasonable... I'm not an expert on Jung. I would never say I was, but I have used the therapy for over 20 years, so I've got some utilitarian knowledge of the situation. And I think sometimes his understanding of those concepts is not complete. It's not quite there.
He's not young enough.
Well, who knows?
Yeah. Jordan Peterson represents something to me too.
What does he, because I'm interested in what he is as a symbol as much as
a symbol. He is the dominant, slightly self-righteous, usually university orientated man, who, speaking generally here, is possibly a professor in psychology, and there are Jordan Peterson-like people out there. And what is particularly strange, I guess, or incongruous, is they're out there in a profession that's 85% female.
I know.
I mean, maybe we're down to 80% female, and maybe, I'm not saying that's good, right? I'm just saying that's the way it is. That makes me think a bit.
I feel like this as a figure, Jordan's probably going to come up a lot going forwards, I imagine. Well, it certainly does for me, because as a figure, I find him super fascinating, because a lot of his influences I use myself, but I haven't come to the same conclusions he has come to.
Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
Anyway, but I feel like we need to refocus on what, the old personal maybe for a minute. So
sorry.
No, it's fine. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Do we need to try and focus on? I'm trying to think. Well, how does this affect me personally?
Well, we can talk about whatever we want, because he is an influence. On psychologists in Australia, he is probably a bigger influence than Oprah. And that's very wrong. I put it to you.
It's very wrong. I think, his message on the surface is pretty hard to argue with. It's like, put yourself together, put your life together, get yourself in order, organize, get a goal, get going. I mean, this stuff is not rocket science. It's pretty, if there's a problem, let's get a plan going for the solution to that problem. And any plan's better than no plan. That's what I tell people I work with. Any plan is better than no plan.
Yeah. So maybe maybe we're reacting to him, which, doesn't say good things about us. Maybe we're reacting to him or the way he delivers his message, because at times I've delivered the same message either to myself or others. I work in a very behavioral way.
And
so I'm into it. I'm into definitely eating breakfast. Do you eat breakfast, Imy?
Well, do breakfast is
between us.
Yeah. Look, I like to work towards that. I have lots of fun chronic health issues. I don't know. Do you find psychologists, especially as they get older, they tend to acquire interesting health problems? So I do eat breakfast, but it tends not to happen it's usually some bloody powder of something and some high protein experience. And sorted, I don't know. I find that psychologists, as they get older, develop weird health issues. And I feel like that's a good conversation to just have at some point because, what's that about? In fact, one of the persons, I won't name the person because that'll be wrong, but there is a person who's a psychologist, and she kicks off life as I think she starts out doing counselling psych, but I can't be quite sure. But anyway, she ended up promoting a form of, if I give too many details, people will know who she is. So how to do this.
A form of health-based advice.
Let's go with experiential therapy, the one where you embody it rather than count chickens or outcomes or rearrange your environment. And it's really good for trauma. You need this sort of therapy to resolve trauma. And she went hell for leather teaching this all over the place for, I reckon it was about a decade. And she was really enthusiastic, and she was also seeing a crazy number of clients as well.
Yes, yeah.
You can't do experiential therapy like that at that pace without incurring some massive consequence. So I'm sorry to say that she recently passed away, and I was not very in a loud way. She just sort of, I really think she tired herself out. But she would have taught a lot of people this form of therapy, and I'm really grateful for her enthusiasm, but I don't know if it shortened her life, I don't know.
Yeah, that's really sad. And
I am sad. I'm very, because she was quite a positive, bubbly sort of person, and she was maybe a little bit too committed to the work, I can't work at that pace. I've got to have a certain number of hours each week, and then that's it. I can't do it. If I do more than that, wheels fall off the next week. So
yes.
And but I think there's she was really committed to the work, and she was trying to help people learn and just share the therapy, because we've got a lot of trauma in our country. I'm sure people everywhere in the world have a lot of trauma, but Australia's full of trauma. In my humble view,
we sure are, aren't we? We sure are.
But to do that work, I do use behavioural therapy at times, but it's not. The older I get, the less I draw on it, and the more I use more experiential therapies, and they are quite demanding on your mirror neurons and your body, because you actually have to kind of embody roles and stories and experiences that the person's had as part of the healing process. And it is demand. At my age now, I could not. When I was in my 30s, oh man, I was almost working like this wonderful lady, but I just couldn't sustain it. I couldn't. The wheels, and then my health fell apart.
Yes, yeah.
And then but then there was meaning there for me, because it was like, well, I've got to. I've got to do something. I'm going to need a plan. I need a plan.
Someone once said to me that I realise I can only do the blue chip things.
Right.
And that's
interesting.
Isn't it? It was not, she was not a psychologist, but it was a very interesting point. And the world of clinical psychology talks about burnout. It talks about resetting after the day, and emotional regulation and so on. But none of these constructs seem strongly worded enough. The research is good, but it's not strongly worded enough to what we grapple. How common is this story that at some point there's a crisis, whether it be a health crisis or whether it be a mental health crisis? Yes, how many practitioners go through it? Why do we never talk about it?
I think we should talk about it.
what brings it on too? Obviously it's multifactorial. I'm not saying for 1 second that it's not, but what preempts your crisis? Is your crisis inevitable? Why aren't we teaching the young people about it?
I try to tell the young people all the time. I tell the young people about it.
But what do we tell the young people?
Well, we tell them to be responsible. With freedom comes responsibility. No, see how there's an edge here, Gerri? So we both went straight.
You tell the young people to make their bed.
Well, there is an edge around this topic because I think it's very complicated. So let's try and go slow. Let me try and refocus on that. That's what you do when it gets complicated. You try and slow down. It is edgy, isn't it?
It is edgy, and I'm just reflecting back on the clinical psych interns I've had where I have had, I guess, a mixed message about, you need to sustain your career over 30 years, but I want you to work really hard today. So,
man, that's a double signal, isn't it? That's a very big double signal.
Yeah, it is a big double signal.
So my mind goes back to,
in my defense, I would like to say you do need to work a bit harder at the beginning of your career, and starting work at 8:30 is pretty standard. But anyway, it is not for us to criticize young people, because we were young people once, a long time ago. I think maxi skirts.
Oh God! And what was going on there? I
don't know what was going on.
Acid wash denim and some fluoro socks at one point. That was not a great fashion moment. There's a big edge around this conversation. We can't focus on it. Look at us. We're going off into the humour land. Okay, I've got some thoughts. Here's some thoughts. Okay, my first thoughts are I think this is somehow related to the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. Okay, I've got a hypothesis forming. Here we go.
Oh wow!
I know. So I think women, this job of collective and state-derived support, let's say, is predominantly the responsibility, everyone assumes, of women. And therefore, it is just expected that it will happen. and there's no discussion about how it will happen. Just that that's your job, and we'll just go back to hopping on the podium and preaching to the masses. Like I don't think there's I think there's an assumption that this is just women's work and what women do.
Yes, women are good and conscientious
and kind and giving, and it's not even acknowledged; it's just assumed.
And also a little bit in the conscientiousness, there's a little bit of anxiety implied.
Oh God.
Sometimes I pretend to be more anxious than I am just to fit in with people. Yeah.
Sneak a bit of anxiety in there.
Yeah. Just to conform to the old peer group pressure.
Anxiety. I think. Look, as I'm talking about this, I'm having the lights are going on in my mind. I think this is why support services are notoriously underfunded, and the service delivery models also pretty useless. It doesn't go anywhere near far enough. It barely covers, your mouth. I remember watching this. I love a reality TV, but I love a historical reality show, right, where they dress up and go back in time.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
I love it. I caught this one on SBS. I don't know how long ago, about Victorian England. And it was about farming culture, and it was in the time where they were making the lace, and my great-grandparents' mothers had all this lace lurking about in someone's cupboard. So I was like, oh, yeah, it's my people. Anyway, they were trying to derive their information from whatever books were available of the day about animal husbandry and that sort of thing. And the lady who was playing the woman person said that there was absolutely nothing written about women, and when it was referenced, it was just assumed that there was this wonderful support structure that just sort of provided cooking and meals and laundry and And I think that the problem that we're in, and this is poor, I don't know how to illuminate Jordan to this. I have no idea how you do this, because it's hidden in the competence hierarchy. It's like that's what it's built on. this underbelt of support that's just assumed. Like
before today, I'd never heard of the competence hierarchy. I'm just
well, there we go.
Bring that out.
Share that with the world. Think of it as a triangle of people standing on other people. And at some point it becomes conscious or just woofty. It's woofty.
Yeah, I can link it back to Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison.
God. God.
Because women are at the centre of his world, and yet I'm so glad at that press conference there was a journalist who said, does that mean you're going to increase the funding of rape crisis centres and refuges? Because if something's important personally, then is it important politically?
Great question. What did the Honourable ScoMo?
You can go to the ABC website and download the entire transcript of the press conference.
I do things like that. Don't even knock that. I sometimes do that shit because I want to know what the data says so I can quote people later.
Because essentially the answer was waffle. And a lot of times our answers are waffle, which I guess is to cover up. We don't know. Yeah, to cover up, we don't know. So, I mean, I'm sure I do it as well. I'm not saying I'm innocent in this regard.
It's a really complex question, is the truth of it. It's a complex issue, and it's impossible to have a one-sentence dialogue or solution to something so complicated as I mean, crikey, we were right in the deep end if we're starting to talk about sexual assault.
Yes,
I mean, because this is hot. Well,
and the other thing that's happening, which I've noticed, this is a general impression, but it's now okay, not okay, but it's now accepted that women are angry.
Yeah, well, that's a bit of an improvement on where we were before, which was we just silent and happy to serve.
Previously you weren't allowed to be angry, but now we're all angry. And it's
we're very angry, and it's not clear why to the men folk collectively.
Yeah,
but they feel that finger pointing.
Yeah, they're nervous. Yeah, yeah.
I know. It's well, see. Jordan did just more on Jordan. God, I'm on a roll with Jordan. Jordan did this thing called the biblical lectures, which goes for it's sort of like a video YouTube version of War and Peace. It just goes on for ages. It's pretty good up until the last couple of after he gets into Exodus. I think it gets a bit confusing, but the Genesis stories are pretty simple. But he gets into this this story about incest. And just sort of skates over it that doesn't happen that much. And I thought to myself, you're working with a really high-functioning population if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because sexual assault is such a complex crime. It's a complex phenomenon, and it's extremely hard to get coherent, sensible, informed, balanced research about. It's just really hard to get it. So because you don't have the data, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But it's in the damn Bible.
Yeah. I
in Genesis.
I don't.
Sorry, one of the characters goes way off track and ends up having sex with his 3 daughters, and then they have children. And this conveniently is not taught in mainstream Christianity. But Jordan did wade through it and I don't think he handled it that well. I wouldn't have included it either.
Yeah. I don't have much to give on this.
Right.
People are telling me that they're triggered by everything that's being talked about, and I see that, and I hear that, and I hope they're okay. I can only support them as best I can.
Sure.
There is some research, but but it's not. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's sometimes things like risk factors or stuff like that.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem to go further into prevention or treatment or asking that essential question that all psychologists have, which is how can we help people?
Yeah. Well, there's this big secret keeping. I mean, a big part of sexual assault, especially when it's happening inside families, is there's a big secret being kept. I feel like we might have to save this because I live in an area where there was a cult, and it did include sexual crimes. Terrible. We won't go into the details of that so much, but so I've treated a lot of people that have been affected by that cult, either directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
And you might say, oh, well, that's not everywhere, but well, how do you know? Because these phenomena are very secret. And anyway, gosh,
it's not everywhere, but as you're saying there, the ripples come out.
Yeah, it's that you can be affected by it indirectly, like, and it's how do you help that kind of phenomenon? Because as psychologists, we're often working with people in very secret situations, and it's complicated. You're working behind a curtain of confidentiality and privacy about a situation that our culture doesn't usually want to look at.
Yes. Well, simultaneously, it's possible, though you have professional standards, and though I'm sure many, many people do extra reading and extra training, I guess we're still fallible. We're still influenced by society.
Yeah. And it might be too much for just the individual practitioner to handle, the sum total of everything that the culture doesn't particularly want to deal with. And there's a lot in that category.
Yeah, there definitely is, isn't there?
Gosh, well, I'm just looking at the time. Gosh darn it.
We're on fire, Amy. We're on fire. But you're right. We've got
time. Well, we can have another crack next week, perhaps. We were thinking of the thought. Well, anyway, we'll work this out. We'll say goodbye for now.
Yeah, we'll say goodbye. Can I flag something that I think would be good for next time?
Good, yes.
Is that I'm so glad we're talking, because the other thing is you might be in a government job in a multidisciplinary team, but you might be the only psychologist.
You might be.
Yeah, and you might be in private practice. And if you're in private practice, you don't necessarily, even if there's somebody in the next room, you don't necessarily have colleagues in the way other professions have colleagues. So though they're there, you probably won't ever bloody get the chance to talk to them, especially not the chance to talk to them in such a relaxed way and in covering so many topics. Because when I talk to my colleagues, who am I kidding? I'm talking to my boss. The time is so limited, I actually have to speak in bullet points, and I refer to my bullet points. And sometimes I even let her know ahead of time, I have 4 bullet points, and we hit the 4 bullet points in 10 minutes, and then we go on to our client or preparing for our client or whatever. So longer reflection doesn't necessarily happen very often. I mean, I know the opposite argument is that supervision takes up some of that role.
It does.
Anyway,
it does.
Long story short, I'm glad to be talking to you.
Oh, yes, good work.
Maybe I want to flag for future talks the issue of loneliness. Who's lonely in our profession? Is it me? Is it you? Is it everyone else? Must be everyone else. No.
well, because
definitely not us.
We'll continue on. We'll continue on in next exciting meeting episode installment. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye.
Oh, bye, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, hang on. Do we want to? Yep.